Hello, hello. We're back again for
Hey,
Wet Ink Wednesday. Hey, Kyle. Kyle Osterberg is joining me today. We've got a writer and GM and somebody who has been a fan of Never Going Home since its very beginning. So happy to talk to you today, Kyle, about your interests and your contributions to the game.
I would say I've been a fan ever since before it was even called Never Going Home. It was at the time it was still called World War Occult RPG in the very early stages.
Before
So
before the when it was just a twinkle in Charlie's eye,
yeah.
and before we'd started to put the rules together. That's right. Um, So, well, that's great. So, like I know you're a nerd. I know you're connected to the GMing space. So tell me a little bit about your like kind of origin, how you got into gaming. I mean, does it start? Did you start early? Did you start late? Like, how'd you get into it?
Um well there's sort of things that I'd like to say laid the foundation. Which is I always had a like for sci-fi and fantasy, so that always helps. And then also as a kid I really loved choose your own adventure books,
Mm,
which are in essence kind of a solo RPG in a sense.
sure.
Um but but I really love those. And then my very first gaming experience was I was camping with my family, and we my father DM'd, and we kind of did a very basic diceless D&D session there around the campfire. Way back in the this is my father is a teacher, and this was in the early 80s, in the height of the satanic panic.
Hmm.
He actually, like, a bunch of students approached him and asked if he would sponsor their D&D school group. And he said he would because they needed a teacher sponsor. And so he had experience with that from that stage. And then I kind of asked him about it, later on once we started getting older, and he kind of did that. And that was my first experience. Um,
It sounds lovely. Like
yeah,
family affair, doing the camp at the campground,
yeah.
like almost the campfire tales kind of element of it, storytelling and stuff.
Right. Basically, interactive storytelling is what that session ended up being. And then fast forward, it was summer of 1995, and I was at Boy Scout summer camp, and a, a friend of mine and a bunch of other guys got this book out, which I had no idea what it was. I just saw the cover, and it was the original cover of Riffs, and we were playing Riffs, and I was like, "What's this?" Well, it's a game. Sit down. We'll teach you. Here's your character. And so I got a character, and I here read this section in the book. This is about what your character does. And it's like, oh, okay. And we played it. I loved it. I thought it was great. And I said, well, where can I get these books? And he told me, oh, you get it at this place called the Fantasy Shop. And he told me where it was. Sadly, the company still exists, but that location no longer does. I'm sad to say. But anyway, that year I had Christmas money and asked my dad to go take me to the store, and I bought my first two RPG books and a set of dice, and I was kind of off to the races. And after that point too, I kind of started GMing because I was the only one who had the books. So
All
if we
right,
wanted to
right.
game, I had to GM. So that's kind of where it started.
Sure. Do you remember that first character that you played?
Yes, it was a juicer, whose name was, forget what it. I want to say his name was Tyler, or that, or I'm conflicting it because there was another guy in our troop whose name was Tyler, who was really short, and I think on height they wrote Tyler for it, which in retrospect for a juicer doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's still kind of
Well,
funny.
you know, they're they're augmented in other ways with
It's
speed
right,
and all the
speed and
chemicals. So,
strength, and yeah.
right. Well, that's fun. So, yeah, so then like you became so were you to go back to where you ended with your side with the did you become a forever GM then? Like or
Uh, I, I sort of. I was. We did. Well, shortly thereafter, I got introduced to second edition D&D. A friend of mine, the same friend that ran this, we ran. It was a box set called First Quest, and it came with 4 introductory adventures, characters, and it came with an audio CD, which I thought was really neat. So, like when you went into this room, you played track 34, and had actors acting out the scenes. And I thought it was a great way to
hmm,
get people into the game. So I played that and like that was great. So uh, a friend of mine, Matt, he bought that set. So we alternated between riffs and D&D somewhat. So I wasn't always GMing, but most of the time I was. So, but that was okay for me, just as long as I didn't have to do it all the time.
sure. I well, it's good that you had like your group, right? You met somebody who knew where to get the books, and then you had a couple people bouncing back and forth. It's good. That's a nice way to get into the hobby. Um, so I want to ask you about conventions because I mostly have interacted with you at Gen Con. You've got your Gen Con
Yeah.
shirt on there.
Yep.
And I feel like I usually see you for about 20 minutes and then you've got to go back to the room where your games are happening and you're running another game. I mean, maybe that's not true, but that's how I feel about like you.
There's some truth to that. um,
So what do you like about conventions and why do you go back and do that intensity of play over and over again? Like what's about cons that makes you so willing to go and do that? Because it's a lot to do, you know.
yeah. I don't honestly know. It's something about the atmosphere. Like there's a tingle in the air, and you can feel it. And it's if you've never been to one, it's really hard to explain. Um, but the best way that I can describe it is it's sort of like if you have a favorite local game shop and you go into it and you're happy and you feel like this is your happy space, then take that feeling and turn it up to 11, and that's what being at a con is. And on the plus side for me, the other thing that gives me energy with it is um, on the one end, it's like, hey, I get to see what's new. Get to see new stuff. It's like, oh, that looks neat. Let me try that. Or what's this about? And it's like, so talking to people. And then on the flip side, I like to uh, run the games because I'm running these games with a whole brand new group of people. And for me, it feels like a way to kind of stretch my GMing not muscles, because I have some people, and I've had this before, where this guy's never played an RPG in his life.
Yeah.
There's
A D10,
another,
which one is that, you know?
yeah, and I've had somewhere, oh, this guy's been playing for 30 years. He knows the system inside and out. So, and I've had those in the same group before too. So it's kind of like uh, a mixed bag with that, and I enjoy having to experience that. And the other thing that I um, inadvertently started doing is I started being able to do it with larger and larger groups, which is something that not everybody can do. But I've had groups as large as like 20 before that I've been able to
Wow.
run, and nobody has said, well, I didn't feel like I got enough attention and
Right.
things with that. So it was just a case of um I somehow figured out how to do it and make it work. So now, don't get me wrong, it does take a lot of energy out of you, but I kind of feed on the energy because I'm excited because like here I wrote this adventure and I want to like, okay, I want to see how this group solves it, and then if I run it again, Greg's like, all right, I have a whole new group of people. Wonder how they're gonna do this adventure, and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's cool. The I you talked about like the excitement and like do you because I'm going to set up for my next question here, but like, do you kind of feel like that when you get one of those players who's like doesn't know how to roll the dice, or has never played this game before, do you feel like sort of almost like a special sort of like, oh boy, I get to introduce you to it? Like, is it, does that, is
A
there, is
certain
there a
extent,
joy there?
if they're completely new to role playing, I get that. It's like, ooh, I am there first. Actually, at the last Palladium Open House, I had a kid who he played in my Heroes Unlimited game, and he had never played an RPG before, and certainly and never been to a convention before. So it was just like like I was his first everything. I was his first GM. I had pre-generated characters, so that was his first character. He liked it so much he went and he bought the book and had me sign it for him since I was his first, like sign it and write the name of the adventure in there so that he would have that to always
Sure.
remember that that's where it started. And I mean that's just a great feeling of I'm going to be in that kid's mind forever. Like he's never gonna forget that first experience because I still remember my first adventure there at summer camp. I don't
Right,
remember
right.
everything about it, of course, but I remember enough about it, how much fun it was and how awesome I thought it was. So I mean that'll stay with the kid forever, and that makes me, that really makes me feel good.
Yeah, that is nice. And I know I know you liked the other, I mentioned before, like I see you for a short amount of time and then you're off to do your next game.
This
But
game,
usually at a convention, when I see you at the Wet Ink Games booth, you're usually trying as hard as you can to introduce other people to Never Going Home. I've seen you sort
yes.
of like round up the crowds, and like you'll I mean, this isn't exactly what you do, but you're almost like standing up with like two copies of the book, like it's the Ten Commandments or something, and you're on the mountaintop, like just showing it off to people, and they're all
Well,
the,
that's part of it. This is the second part of the answer that I didn't forget to give. On one end, it's introducing someone brand new to gaming, and the other end, it's someone who's a veteran gamer. Of you have got to check out this game out. This game is so awesome because you may have tried other things, but and that's fine. And I like all sorts of different types of games, but you've got to try this game because this game is so awesome, and it's something like I'm very passionate about it, and like I even like I had someone once. We weren't even running a game or anything. We were just kind of like walking down the hallway. This guy he saw my shirt and kind of had questions because I was wearing a gaming shirt. I forget for which game it was, and so he kind of asked me, and I'm sitting there, explaining the game to him, and it's like, oh, like like hey, do you have somewhere to be? And it's like I kind of do, but at the same time, I'm actually having more fun, expressing my love of this game to you than I would be playing in another one. So like there's I have a lot of passion there that I like to share with people
yeah,
on that end.
uh, definitely you have been an advocate for Never Going Home in particular, and I'm sure other people have for like you said, Heroes Unlimited or the other games that you can probably name. You do really get excited to share games with people. And that's a thread that I think we'll pick up on in a minute, but I do want to get in a little bit of a history because I know you're kind of a big fan of history, I believe. Um,
Uh, Very much so. I studied it in college.
so I I know your profile picture on one of the social medias I always think it looks like it's you as Theodore Roosevelt. Is that what that
Yes,
is a picture of?
that is correct. That's who I'm supposed to be. That was Halloween one year.
Oh, Halloween. Okay. So I was going to ask if it like you went so far as to be into reenacting stuff and
Oh
interpreting
no,
stuff and
not that far. I mean, I've been to reenactments and things, but I have not participated. It's one of those things I would actually love to do, but I just don't have the time.
yeah, I imagine it's like you need a whole summer vacation to go do that almost. Um
Right.
yeah. So that, I mean, with that little bit of like, I dressed as TR for Halloween as your like as a credit to the thing. What else about history sort of, or any particular areas or anything, obviously we're going to talk about World War I here in a minute, but like what's your other areas of interest within the history area?
Um, all kinds of things. It depends on where we are. My interest in World War One spawned actually from my interest in World War Two, and because that's where it started. I blame Steven Spielberg, um, but it
Yeah,
started with
he's
yeah,
probably responsible for a lot of
yeah,
people.
probably. So it started with World War II, and then you kind of look to the lead up. So then I got kind of interested in the Great Depression, and then I got interested in World War I, because you can't really understand World War II unless you understand World War I. And the more I learned things about World War I, especially coming when it was right around the same time that Never Going Home was out, and the we were coming up on the centennial for World War I. A couple of different things happened that really sparked my interest. One was I found out about Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, Blueprint for Armageddon. If you've never listened to it, it's a great podcast. Go listen to it. Um, Even people that don't like history like it. And then number two was there was a YouTube channel called The Great War, which started um, the same. It started in 2014, and it was they were basically doing that week in World War I, exactly 100 years
Mm,
later, what happened. So every week there was a new episode, and it followed it week by week, and it didn't just cover the Western Front, which is most when you get things about World War I. Most of what you focus on, at least here, is the Western Front, and there's
mhm.
so much more. It was it's and as when I as a kid I always thought, oh, World War I, they call it a world war, but it wasn't really a world war because it was just like in Europe. I'm like, no, there
Yeah,
was stuff that happened in Africa, there was stuff that happened in the Middle East. There's Japan seizing German islands. I mean, there was things everywhere. So it's just
right,
one of those things of the more I learned about it, the more fascinating, because those stories aren't told as often, and
right,
so there's a lot more interest in it for me.
right. I mean, so then take all that and talk about like what adventure you got to work on um for this set of dossiers that we're putting together now that are what's your adventure? You don't have to go through all the beats of it, but like what have you written for this particular set of stuff?
Well, I'm in the 1918 dossier, which is focusing on the American experience in World War I. And the adventure I wrote is actually, I think, the first one in the book, which is, at least chronologically anyway, is basically you're traveling across the Atlantic Ocean from the U.S. to Europe. And you know most of the time it's like, oh yeah, he went to Europe, and then that, and you're leaving out a huge part, which is that voyage is dangerous. Not only is it you know the regular dangers of just ocean crossing in general, with storms and things like that, you also add the U-boat menace into it. And you also got to remember too, like, these transport ships, like, those guys were packed to the gills. Like, if you can see old footage where the deck is just guys shoulder to shoulder standing on that deck. So like that, the journey in and of itself is dangerous. And like that's when the mission really, the starts. You're not even at Europe yet, and you're already in danger. And possible that whole ship goes down, and you die before you even see the shore.
Yeah, that's that's a it's a dramatic thing, and I think the we've got different moments from the 1918 book focuses on all the different moments, right, from the crossing of the Atlantic to Europe, and then the last adventure is like the final day of the war, the
Leading right
in
up
no
to the armistice, if
right,
memory.
right, it's like the you're there as when the last American is killed in the war, right, like that's sort of the so it's those almost vignettes. They're connected, but
Yeah,
there's that's what we're trying to achieve. So like it is a
yeah,
cool thing to have the very beginning where you're on the ship going over, like it's the song says over there, like that's the over
yeah,
there is getting on the boat and going
yeah,
over
over
there.
there, yeah.
So it's good. And and then there's some surprises, and it's supernatural stuff, but we'll let people find
Yeah,
out when
we'll
they
we'll
when they
let them
play it
find out
when
for
they play
themselves.
it. Yeah. So I also know that you have another idea that you've since you've been a fan from the beginning of Never Going Home, you've talked to us, and you're a person that we know, but you keep pitching an idea to us, and it's like it's not quite the right time yet. But I think we might find a way to get it out there someday. But what's the other thing that you are really excited to maybe tackle within the Never Going Home universe?
Well, the other thing I want to tackle, which is something like it's not considered part of World War One, but I do because if you look at the timeline, it kind of makes sense. Which is I am really curious about um, the Mexican expedition, where basically Pancho Villa raided American towns, and then uh, Americans put together a force to kind of led by Blackjack Pershing, who would become famous later in World War I as the head of the American forces. But basically, he led a mission to try to find Pancho Villa and stop him from you know raiding American towns. And this is all happening while they're fighting and dying in the trenches, across the pond. So it's just one of those things of I think that'd be a nice aspect, sort of how I just see them as kind of like two wars or two theaters in a way within the same sphere. Sort of how you have in World War II, you have the second Sino-Japanese War going on concurrently with Hitler's march across Europe. Both wars are going on at the same time. We They only kind of became connected when Japan attacked us and the British Empire, basically creating two fronts. So there are two in unconnected wars that kind of became connected. Um, in
Yeah.
the case of the Mexican incursion, it was more of, well, we're going to stop, and you know the war in Europe was getting closer and closer, so we decided to kind of stop our hunt for Pancho Villa and focus more on that because we knew it was coming. So that's something I want to explore at a future Never Going Home supplement. Like I said, the timing isn't quite right, and I don't have all the details that I want to do with it yet, but it's something I definitely want to do in the future.
I think we can find a way to make it happen. We've got some ideas for, we're obviously focused on this particular set of dossiers, but
Right.
the interest in the game will, I'm sure, continue, and there might be a way to
Right.
do it in the future. So we'll talk more eventually. Um, all right. Well, I think we're getting kind of close to the end of our time here today, but before we go, I want to make sure that you can shout out any other projects that you've got that you might be working on or anything coming soon with your byline on it. Do you got anything else you're busy with in the nerdosphere or?
Not currently. The campaign dossiers for 1918 is my current project that I'm working on, and that the future idea there about the Mexican expedition, I am hoping for in the meantime. But and unfortunately, I may not make it to Gen Con this year. I don't know yet.
Hmm,
Um, which I normally go every year, but I just started a new job at the beginning of this year, so that makes it a little more difficult
sure.
to make the con this year. But if nothing else, then I'm almost always running something at future con. So you can, if you want to see what it's like with me in the GM seat, you can find me. I'm usually running at least three, sometimes up to. I think one year I did five different uh, games at Gen Con.
Wow,
So
that's a lot. And
yeah,
and certainly not 20 tables each time, right? 20 people each time, right?
not each time. I've done. I did one year though where I did like 12
Wow.
each time. I think I did four sessions. Each one was 12.
Mm,
So
that's good on you. That's a lot of work. All right, Kyle. Thank you so much for talking to me today. Before we go, is there any place people can find you if they want to see your, Halloween costumes of historical figures or read your work that's been put in the Rifter or anything? Where is there a place to find you on
um,
the internet?
uh, if you want to find me, you can find me on Facebook, or you can shoot me an email. You can email me at East Mountain Gamer. It's all one word at gmail.com. And hopefully I'll get back to you.
All right. Well, there you go. Thanks again for your time. And we'll be looking forward to seeing you, if not at Gen Con this year, at some con in the future.
Future. All right.